Good morning, everyone. We have a great show lined up for you today on SUNUP. It's wildfire season. Learn practical ways to protect your home and property this time of year. Plus, honest two-way communication, just one of several aspects of the veterinarian-client patient relationship to ensure the best possible outcomes for your animals. And with drought conditions in Oklahoma, we learn why vitamin A deficiencies in cattle could be an issue this spring. Grab that hot cup of coffee because SUNUP starts right now. Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Even with chances of rain, wildfire risk certainly remains high in Oklahoma this time of year. So this week we want to begin with some common sense ways to protect your home and your property with OSU Extension fire ecologist John Weir.
Hello, I'm John Weir. I'm the Senior Extension Specialist for Prescribed Fire and Fire Ecology here at Oklahoma State University. And today we're going to talk about how to protect your home and property from wildfire. Things to think about around your home would be up at the eaves if you have guttering and you have trees, especially a lot of hardwood trees around your home. They're going to deposit leaves when the leaves come off and get collected up in there. That has been a definite cause of a lot of problems and fires to homes and stuff, is by not cleaning those gutters out and keeping them clean and embers getting in there and catching the eave of the house on fire. The other thing to think about is what else is around it, like wooden privacy fences are also a big culprit and problem for homes, because again, that wooden fence comes right up there next to the house and attaches to the house in most cases, and it's also right there underneath the wooden eaves or the soffit of the house. And so again, that fence catches on fire from a fire coming through there, and the flames go up and get into the eave or the soffit of the house, and that's what causes that. Just like here behind me, you want to think about your flower beds and things like that. You probably want to remove some of the vegetation from this flower bed. Again, it's all dormant, dead fuels and stuff. And so you want to cut and remove that fuel to get them out of there so you don't have any problems and take any chances of it being a problem like that. So with that, let's go around back of the house and look at some other things that that would be a concern. All right, around on this side of the house, you can see we have a deck. Again, decks can be a big concern because again, a lot of times too, again, it depends on what that deck is constructed of. So again, this deck here is made of composite material, so it's not as flammable. So that's a good thing to think about if you're thinking about building a deck or replacing boards and things on a deck that needs it, is using composite material so it's not as flammable. But with any kind of deck though, it's really good. As you'll notice, we have stuff taken down all the way to the ground level, so that way stuff cannot blow underneath and accumulate and collect. So again, if you have an area around your home, you got a lot of leaves and stuff, you don't want all those leaves blowing and accumulating underneath that deck, because all that fuel accumulates and embers can fall down between those cracks and gives it a very good source of ignition from underneath there. Another thing also to think about, just like what we have up here, we've got patio furniture and stuff on that. One of the things to think about, especially if conditions warrant it, or if you have a lot of patio furniture, those cushions and stuff are extremely flammable. Embers can drop on them. That foam is very flammable. That could be another source of ignition. So during bad weather or during fire weather periods of wildfire conditions, you may want to store those cushions and stuff indoors somewhere safe where they won't be a problem, won't be an ignition source setting on that patio or on that furniture. So now we've looked at that, let's go look at some outbuildings, look at the shop over here and see what we can do to protect it. One thing we need to do with our shop buildings, outbuildings, and barns that we have is get into practice of keeping the doors and everything closed up on them. That's just good practice to do, and it's really good to do during wildfire season, because again, we don't want any way for embers and stuff to get in that building. You know, we got to reduce that chance of that, because there is a lot of flammable material typically stored inside shops and barns and things like that. So again, the more that we can keep it closed up, the less chance that we're going to have fire inside there. So remember, keep that things closed up, keep the doors shut at all times. The other thing to think about, especially with outbuildings, just like your home, is thinking about what is stored or what is growing right next to that building and stuff. So again, just like your home, you want to make sure you don't have flammable material stored right there next to your house. So again, wood, any kind of flammable stuff. Don't stack hay right next to your building. You know, move that stuff out away from there a distance, so if it does catch on fire, it's going to have an area to burn. It's not going to damage your building or take a potential of catching that building on fire or anything inside of it. The other thing to do, where it has been a problem with it, that I've heard from several people have their barns burned up, is where they've allowed grass and stuff to grow up between and go underneath the tin and get inside the building, and that fire travels through that. So again, it's really good practice to weed eat, manage that vegetation and keep it down really short around your building, and keep that fuel load down so stuff that can't grow up real tall next to it or even take the chance of it growing inside the building. So again, I hope this helps, and I hope you all stay safe during this wildfire season. And again, remember to just a little bit of thought and a little bit of preparation long before a wildfire ever occurs goes a long way. And for more information about wildfire prevention and wildfire protection of your home and property, go to the SUNUP website.
Continuing on the topic of wildfire, or any disaster for that matter, there are many other things you can do and plan for now. We caught up with OSU Extension Ag Policy Specialist Dr. Amy Hagerman to talk about where to begin.
So on our OSU Extension website, we have a lot of resources, both for preparation, response, and recovery whenever a fire happens. But just focusing on some of those preparation activities, I think the key is to really think through the scenarios that you might face for a fire, whether it is one on a neighboring property that results in an evacuation but no damages, a fire that actually affects your individual home or property, or a nearby fire that creates a smoke situation that you have to deal with at your property.
So that's a good way to kind of categorize it, because obviously it can be very overwhelming. Mm-hmm. So if people are just getting started in the preparation piece, what are some key things that you say these are absolutely essential, but mm-hmm. hopefully don't take too long to get organized?
Absolutely. So you start with your records, right? So let's start with our insurance. Have that annual conversation with an insurance provider. Find out if my coverage is, number one, what I think it is, and number two, does it need to be updated for any improvements that I have made on my property or any other changes I may have made on my property in the last year. So January and February are a great time to have that conversation, just an annual reminder to check your insurance. Make sure you have a copy of those documents and any other critical documents that you need that are ready to go in case you have to evacuate because of a fire situation. Now, a lot of people like to store those documents on a safe on their own property. That's a great start, but bear in mind, most safes are fire resistant, not fire proof, which means if a fire is hot enough or long enough, it could essentially bake your papers inside of the safe. So have a secondary copy of those in some way. Maybe that is a secondary location, like a safety deposit box, where you keep the originals and maybe you have your copies at home in your safe. Maybe it's a situation where you digitize your copies and have those at your fingertips if you have to evacuate your home. But the big thing is that you want to make sure you have any critical medical documents, legal documents, identification, any contact information or phone numbers, lists of medication for a family member that you might need to have at your fingertips ready to go. Have those documents ready to go. And it kind of, as we're talking about contact information, sometimes our cell phones can die in these situations if we can't get to a charger fast enough. You might consider having like a secondary charger that you always keep in your car. Most of us do anyway. It's a handy thing to have no matter what. Or maybe even have a solar charger that you can use. Another great thing you can do is have all that contact information tucked right in the console of your vehicle so that you have it in hard copy if you have to borrow somebody else's phone to contact someone.
When those evacuation orders happened, which we have seen in the last year, Payne County and Stillwater really affected by wildfires last spring. I mean, it was no time. I mean,
Yes.
they just had to get out, get the
Absolutely.
very, very basics. Their lives were on the line.
Yeah, and you're not running around figuring out like, where's my charger?
Right.
However, if you have a go bag ready to go in your home, you can have those things ready to go. And that's a great thing to pack going into this season, storm season, whether we're talking about fires or tornadoes or whatever we're talking about. Having a go bag that's ready to just pick up, throw over your shoulder, and walk away. And we've got some great resources on how to pack a go bag.
Let's talk about livestock a little bit and kind of some of the planning there. And you can arm yourself in advance, which hopefully will provide some reassurance heading into this season.
Yeah, again, it's thinking through those scenarios and having a plan under any given scenario. Think about where those bare pieces of ground are on your property. Like livestock like to congregate, they kind of trample the grass down and you end up with a nice bare piece of ground. That's actually a really safe zone for livestock if something happens. Thinking about where, if you have time, where you would load and evacuate your animals to. Again, we go back to that contact information. Who's your third person that you're going to in the event of an evacuation? Where are you taking your cattle, your horses, your show stock, if something were to happen?
Okay, Amy, great advice. Thank you very much. And for a link to the resources that Amy mentioned from OSU Extension, just go to sunup.okstate.edu.
Are you interested in getting involved in egg production? If so, OSU Extension has a great opportunity for you. OSU recently launched its Selling Eggs in Oklahoma online course. The course is designed to assist aspiring egg producers in getting the appropriate licenses, applying safety practices for washing and storing eggs, and much, much more. The fee for this course is $30, and if you'd like to learn more, just visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Good morning, everyone. This is State Climatologist Gary McManus with your Mesonet Weather Report. Well, another week with very little in the way of moisture, another week with changes on the drought monitor. Let's get right to the new map. Okay, we have the same basic pattern. Most of the state covered in at least moderate drought, but we do have those patches of severe to extreme drought down in southwestern, south central, up into central, and over in northeast Oklahoma, another patch down in southeastern Oklahoma, and we have abnormally dry conditions that have spread over much of the rest of the state. Really, the only part of the state not showing dry conditions would be the western half of the Oklahoma Panhandle. Even those folks are not in too good a shape, and they might be in danger of going into some of these colors if we're not careful. So with rains falling this weekend, we are expecting some improvements, but let's take a look at where we are right now. Here we can see the consecutive days with less than a quarter inch of rainfall map from the Oklahoma Mesonet. Most places now, once again, over a month. Some places close to 80 days, some places over 80 days. Now we did have a little bit better moisture down across the southeastern third of the state, a little bit out in west central Oklahoma, but by and large just another long dry spell in the state of Oklahoma, making that drought get worse. Just a reminder about how dry this winter has been. So this is the climatological winter, December 1st through February 10th. We look at the percent of normal moisture amounts across the state. Most of these are less than 50%, and a lot of these are less than 25%, or just thereabouts. So once again, the winter's been a very big disappointment, at least moisture-wise, across the state. The stats over this time frame aren't much better. You can see from this graph that if you look at the different parts of the state, many of those are in the driest, December 1st through February 10th, going back to at least 1921, so 105 years. And statewide, we've just had 1.27 inches of moisture. That's about 3 inches below normal, or about 30% of normal, and that's the driest December 1st through February 10th on record, average statewide. Now let's look ahead to next week's precipitation outlook. We do see increased odds of below normal precipitation across the entire state, and don't look for any snow soon. We do see increased odds of above normal temperatures as well. So back to where we've been for most of the winter, warm and dry. Hopefully this week's moisture leads to some improvements on next week's map, or at least stops the spread of that drought. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
I'm Mark Turner, Wildlife Extension Specialist at OSU, and today we're going to be talking about how wildlife respond during and after a wildfire. One thing that a lot of folks often ask questions about after seeing a large area that's burned, especially during a big wildfire event, is what exactly happened to all the animals that were there, and how long is it going to take for animals to come back to those areas? Something that's important to consider and always keep in the back of your mind is that the vast majority of wildlife species that we have are fire adapted. So they may not necessarily respond positively to fire, especially in the immediate while it's happening, but certainly they respond very quickly and they're able to both avoid the fire and also potentially benefit from things that the fire provided. During a large fire event, most of those animals are either going to see the smoke or smell it. They may also see the fire, and they're very quickly going to make moves to escape that fire. So for something like a deer, oftentimes they're going to run out of the area. Same for something like a rabbit. Certainly animals like birds are able to fly away. For species that are smaller, including things like turtles and snakes and reptiles that are not able to actually run away from the fire quickly enough, they actually, most of the time, are actually going to stay put and seek out areas that avoid fire. So they may get down into a drainage. Some of them may burrow into the ground. And by simply getting into an area that's not going to burn, they're going to survive the fire event and then obviously be able to go on about their lives afterwards. When animals return from the fire kind of depends on the species. Again, some of those animals are not even going to have left the site. For other animals, they may actually flock back in relatively quickly to use some of the resources that fire provides. For example, there may be a bunch of insects that were killed during the fire, and so oftentimes you'll see birds even hunting right on the edge of the fire or just behind the fire event, eating some of those insects that were consumed during the fire. For species like deer, generally they're not going to use the area that was burned until things start regrowing, but relatively soon after the growing season starts back, within a month or so, they're going to be back in that area eating those relatively nutritious sprouts from those plants. So as I mentioned before, several wildlife species actually do benefit and seek out areas that were impacted by wildfire. Fortunately though, given all of the negatives that happen with wildfire, we don't actually have to wait for a wildfire event to occur for those species to benefit. We can simply use prescribed fire, and by using prescribed fire in a way that we reduce wildfire risk and also benefit wildlife species, we can see benefits to multiple resource objectives. One thing to consider is that the wildlife response is going to vary based on the vegetation response, and a lot of the plant community response is actually going to vary based on previous management. For example, the area behind me was actually treated with several prescribed fires leading up to a wildfire event that occurred about a year ago. And as you can see, there's a lot of vegetation in the understory. Most of the trees are fine. And whenever we compare that to an area that was burned with a wildfire where there was not that previous management ongoing, a lot of the overstory trees were killed and there's not nearly as much vegetation in the understory. So some of our management actions, including prescribed fire, can actually help reduce some of the negative effects that we might see from a wildfire event, such as overstory tree loss. For more information on wildlife response to fire, check out some of the resources linked here on the SUNUP page.
For those that are new to the livestock industry or raising animals themselves, there's nothing better coming from a veterinarian than establishing your veterinary client-patient relationship early. The time to not do that is when you have an emergency. Worst time, my opinion, to develop a veterinary client-patient relationship is at 2 a.m. calving call. Nobody's happy to deal with that. So what we encourage folks to do, including those that have been in operation for some time, is to, on an annual basis, make sure you reestablish that veterinary client-patient relationship. Set a time, sit down with your veterinarian, assess what your goals are for the operation, make sure that both the veterinarian and you as the operator have similar approaches, that you understand expectations from each other so that you can hopefully plan to avoid those emergencies in the long run.
Good morning, Oklahoma, and welcome to Cow-Calf Corner. This week we talk about branding in Oklahoma, particularly how to move forward to register a brand in Oklahoma. As of now in North America, a brand is still the most widely recognized means of establishing ownership of beef cattle, and branding comes with three really significant advantages. It is a tremendous form of permanent ID, it is an excellent deterrent to cattle thieves, and if cattle have ever been stolen, it comes in really handy in trying to recover those cattle because of those first two advantages. So how would we go about registering a brand in Oklahoma? We'd contact the Oklahoma Cattlemen's Association. There is an application form, a $60 brand application fee that would come with that, and we would get a brand approved, and it could become our brand to establish ownership at that point. Certain things to remember as far as registering a brand. Brands expire in years that end in 0 and 5. So for example, if we registered a brand this year in 2026, we would need to renew that again in the year 2030. Brands need to go in specific locations. All this is explained on that brand application. We've actually got 8 locations on an animal where we could apply and register our brand. And when should we brand? Well, typically we'd like to do it prior to weaning. We'd like to establish a permanent ID whenever we could, but as we think about the weaning process, weaned calves are more likely to stray, get loose, and so typically we think about doing something prior to weaning as far as getting that brand or our permanent identification on those animals. Brands need to be of a certain size. Again, one of the things covered in that brand application. So, branding is very handy as far as management. It is an excellent deterrent to cattle theft. It's not mandatory in the state of Oklahoma, but can be done and offers some advantages. Hope this helps, and as always, thanks for joining us on Cow-Calf Corner.
Finally today, even with rain in the forecast, periods of extended drought can cause nutrition concerns in cattle, especially when it comes to vitamin A. For guidance, here's our OSU Extension beef cattle specialist, Dr. Paul Beck.
Hi, I'm Paul Beck, State Extension Beef Cattle Specialist for Oklahoma State University. Today we're going to talk about vitamin A and its role in production and, the impacts of deficiencies of vitamin A. Vitamin A is a naturally occurring fat-soluble vitamin. We get it from green-growing forages. Its compound is beta-carotene in growing grass that is converted into vitamin A. Vitamin A is stored in the liver, so when we have excess vitamin A during the summer and into the fall, the cattle will store this in their liver and have about 3 months of supply through the liver. The problem with vitamin A is when we have mature dormant forages, or as forages mature, like they did this fall, they start losing that vitamin A content as they turn brown and going from green to brown. When these forages are deficient in beta-carotene and the cattle are not getting that vitamin A from their diet, and they run out of those storages, then we can have a lot of different issues. And primarily, after that excess runs out, we can have low vitamin A in the colostrum as calves are born, and they cannot gain that vitamin A from the colostrum, which is their primary source of vitamin A at birth. When they're deficient in vitamin A through gestation, we can have calves that are born blind because retinol or vitamin A is important with eyesight. One of the first symptoms that we will actually notice with mature cows will be night blindness. So cows will not be able to see as well as we're going from early evening hours into dark. Another issue, it's also deeply tied into growth, muscle metabolism, and bone metabolism. So we will have a lot of weak calves if we have a deficiency in vitamin A for these cows going through the winter. To take care of this, a mature gestating cow needs about 30,000 international units of vitamin A per day. This can be supplied in commercial feeds, commercial mineral mixes, and most of our commercial feeds do have vitamin A added into them. It does have a shelf life, so if it's been stored for a long period of time, or allowed to get weathered during storage, then we may have depleted vitamin A in those commercial feeds. If we're just relying on regular salt out of a salt block or something like that, that is not fortified with vitamin A. So those are issues whenever we're starting to feed hay early in the fall, or relying on a lot of dormant forages that they're grazing earlier in the fall, going into the spring. Then when we start getting deficient, we need to be supplying that through that winter period to keep those levels up. We have a excellent fact sheet available from Oklahoma State University on vitamin A and beef cows. If you have questions about this or feel you have problems with this, contact your local county extension office.
That'll do it for our show this week. Remember, you can see SUNUP anytime on our website, follow us on social media, and stream our content anytime at youtube.com/SUNUPTV. We leave you today with some great video from calving season. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at SUNUP.